Welcome to the Paperless Productivity Podcast, where we have experts give you the insights, know-how, and resources to help you transform your workplace from paper to digital, while making your work life better at the same time.
Hello, my name is Steve Dale. I'm a senior account executive with ImageSoft, and I'm going to be hosting today's podcast. I'm very excited to introduce Deputy Chief Bryce Baker and Officer Eddie Christudis from the Palatine Police Department. They were one of our first SafeEncounter customers, so welcome, guys.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Steve. Nice to meet you.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in talking about SafeEncounter. I'm curious how you would describe the SafeEncounter program to someone who's unfamiliar with it.
I would describe the program as a very intuitive solution for us to help keep track of people who will wander, whether that might be elderly people who are suffering from schizophrenia or some sort of dementia, who have been known to walk away, and then they usually want to have ID with them so we can help identify them. Or it could also be like children or kids who have autism or some other disabilities that might make it more difficult for the police in an encounter to be able to figure out who they are and where they came from and how we can get them back home or get them back to the people who can safely take care of them.
Yeah, that's great. I know in talking with you guys in the past, I know you've been doing quite a bit of community outreach to try and get more people signed up in your community. What makes somebody a good candidate for this program?
Yeah, it'd be great for anybody who, especially for family members or like school teachers or caregivers who are working with people who are suffering from these, problems in life where they're not able to communicate well. And again, as they go to wander. So as we're reaching out to other police departments to tell them about the SafeEncounter module, we're going to the school districts, because each of our school districts here in town has a special ed program where they have kids who suffer from autism and other things like that. But also we're going to like retirement homes to speak with them. So because sometimes we have 3 or 4 of those in town, and occasionally we'll have someone wander off from there. And as long as you usually don't get too far, it's easy for us to find where they came from, but it's not always that. We border numerous other communities, and people could come in from those communities and wander into our town. So we want to be able to help them out to help get these people back to where they belong.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
For us, one of the great successes here has been really pushing the program to our officers. I have been on calls where, you come across a resident, a certain situation, and we have officers now that say, hey, this would be a good person. So the family might not have heard about SafeEncounter, but now that our officers all know about it, they kind of pick the most tech-savvy guy and say, hey, help this family get set up, and we'll get that citizen kind of put into the system right there, then on the spot.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I guess to backtrack just a little bit, what made you guys interested in SafeEncounter at Palatine? I mean, I think you had maybe tried something in the past, but just curious what made you interested in the program?
Yeah, so over 20 years ago, we started a thing called Project Help, which stood for Helping Every Lost Person. So this was a very difficult paper process that we had. So much like Eddie was saying, like we encountered somebody on the street who would now qualify for SafeEncounter. Before, we would have to write a report on that person, and then we had a separate paper form we'd fill out to document what we knew about this person, who their family members are, what their phone numbers were, addresses, all that information to help figure out who do we call the next time we encounter this person. And then we'd file that away, and then we had to go back to the family and say, hey, can we get a picture of them? If we do that, we put them in there. But like anything, it's paper. And so we have a binder full of hundreds of these things. And each year we'd have to go through that and sort through them. We'd run checks on them and say, is this person even still alive, or is it time to take them out of the book? Do they still live in Palatine? And then sort through there. And so that was a very time-consuming process for our officers to be doing.
In addition, as a patrol officer on the street, I think one of the most difficult things about our old system was it was a PDF file on our computers. If we had, a 12-year-old, we had to sift through, 20, 30, 40, depending on how many people were in this file, and try to find that person. So we couldn't sort, we couldn't search, we couldn't filter out. One thing I love about SafeEncounter is if I've got an elderly female, I can put in female into the search, box. I can actually get a map of people in that area. So I don't have to look, our town, it's not a huge town, but it's large enough. So I can kind of zoom into a certain area and see all the people that have been entered in SafeEncounter. So it's a huge time saver compared to how we were using it before.
Yeah, really amazing that you guys have been, had a program that had been going on for so long, and this is the next iteration of it. So it's great to hear. So
yeah, and like going on, Eddie said too, he's had a PDF file, and that's something newer that we've done the last couple of years, that we were able to, convert those. We'd scan in all these paper files, convert them to PDFs, upload them into the hard drive that's accessible in our squad car computers. But before that, the officers had to come into the station. So you'd have one guy standing out there on the street with the person, the other guy would come in here and go sifting through a binder one by one, try to find the right people. This kind of looks like that kid or this elderly man. So that's it, then go back out there. So it took a lot of time. It took multiple people off the street. Whereas, yeah, with SafeEncounter now, we can just get it all done right there on our terminals with an internet connection, do all that searching, filtering.
yeah, perfect. So Officer Eddie, this question is more for you, but it wasn't that long after you went live with SafeEncounter that you guys had what you were calling a save. Can you sort of describe what that situation looked and felt like for you?
I can. I'm kind of the resident tech guy here on patrol. So I was the guy that I was referring to in the other question. And, I just was very curious about how this was going to work out. Was it really going to be something beneficial for us? So we had an elderly female, I believe she was in her 70s. This was in May of 2022. Her husband was a few years older than her. She actually had left her residence somewhere around 8:30 p.m. the previous night. He didn't know she left. We kind of pieced that all together. And then at 6 a.m., he figures out that she's not in the apartment. He then waits a couple of hours to call us. So we finally track her down. She hadn't gone too far, but she suffered from dementia. And so she had no idea where she was. We were able to track her down. And this was a textbook case for somebody that needed to be entered into SafeEncounter. So I helped them, and that's the beauty of it, right? Like whatever device they have, if they've got a mobile phone, if they've got a desktop, we can help them on their devices. And I've had cases where I'll actually input the information on mine and they just have to confirm an email. So it's very easy. So we put her in the system and that was that. And I want to say it was maybe 10 or 12 days later, we get a 911 call. And it was interesting because they described her as an elderly female that was inside someone else's apartment. And I thought, oh man, like this kind of was the same area of the previous call, the person I put into SafeEncounter. And again, with the old system, I would have to call back to the radio desk. They would have to look through, maybe a paper file or a PDF. But here I was able to get on my smartphone, open up SafeEncounter, and I had the husband's phone number right there, ready to go. I didn't have to look through our records management system or anything like that. While I was driving to the call, Bluetooth, of course, I called the husband. I said, hey, is your wife around? He, again, hadn't realized she had left. And I said, well, here's exactly where she is. Meet me over there. And by the time the police arrived, the husband was already there and we reunited them. So I became a believer after that call.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, our vision for a solution like this, it feels so good for that vision to actually come to fruition. And, constituents at the end of the day are the ones who are getting the most help out of this. So that's great. Appreciate, kind of hearing about that.
And I'll tell you, Steve, like the normal protocol for us is if we didn't have that husband's contact information and she wasn't able to really tell us who she was or where she lived, is we'd call the fire department, we'd have her transported to the hospital, and then it's kind of just a waiting game and a lot of, kind of detective that has to happen for us to make these the reunifications. So a huge, huge.
So, this was 10 minutes of time, versus however many hours it takes and a lot more folks involved. So, that sounds like it worked really well in this situation. And it seems pretty self-explanatory why SafeEncounter is beneficial for the community. And you guys have alluded to this a little bit in some of the answers to questions before, but is there anything else that you've discovered on the sort of the police side of things that makes this a valuable tool and a valuable program?
Yeah, so in the modern age of policing, we're always looking for any vehicle that we can to get into public relations and get into our communities to talk to them about something and provide a new service to them that is, pretty, an easy lift, but it can show a lot of value. So this is SafeEncounter has provided us a conversation to have with different groups, civic groups, schools, retirement homes, to show that we're out there being part of our community and say, here's something that benefits you. It doesn't cost you anything to do it, but it's going to be very helpful for you in those situations when things don't go right. And that's a huge PR win for us as a police department in today's age of policing, to have that kind of solution to it for us to show to our public, to show to our village council, to show to, just the residents and business owners. I'm like, hey, we're out here working for them. It's not just always about enforcement, the police being the police, but we're out here. We want to help, get people to where they need to be. And SafeEncounter is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and I think you sort of addressed some of the last question that I had for you guys, but I'll ask it anyway. And that's, why should other districts, why should other agencies, other villages, other cities consider this for themselves?
Yes, I mean, like we said, we've been doing this for a long time, and I've talked to some other law enforcement executives who I know, and like they all have somewhat of a similar version of this. At some level, and they may not as robust as we had it as far as the paper process goes, but we're all struggling with this thing. And there's so much mental illness on the rise now. We've seen that through legislation that's been passed in Illinois. Obviously, mental health is a very important topic now, not just for the health of police officers, but the health of our community and how our police interacting with people with mental health issues. So this is a great solution to try to bridge that gap. Like I said, in the first week that we turned this on, we had 4 calls that week where we went there, and like, even as the administration, we have our radios on our offices. We heard the calls come out, like, that sounds like a SafeEncounter thing. So we're contacting the watch commander, like, hey, make sure the patrolmen know about this. And the patrolmen embraced it, like, well, this is great, because they didn't have to fill out a piece of paper. Now all they had to do was provide a website and just do a little bit of follow up with that resident to say, hey, let's get your child in here, let's get your father into this program. And, it's a win for everybody. I think actually the first person we put in there was one of our officers lives in town, and his parents live in town, and his father has some issues. And he was actually the first person that we put in there just in case he went missing.
I just think, most of us got into this job because we wanted to help people, right? And we wanted to serve the community. And I've witnessed it firsthand, just the anxiety and, the chaos that exists in a family when you have a person that wanders off. And where did they go? Where could they be? And they're trying to, in that moment, give us a picture of them or any kind of information. And I remember one of the first calls that I went to, not the one I described earlier, but a different one, where I was able to just kind of present the program and say, hey, this is all you have to do. And just seeing that anxiety just roll off of this daughter's face, just say, oh my gosh, so next time this happens, it doesn't have to be this chaotic. The police are already going to have all the information, and them being able to update it as well is a huge thing. I think is very helpful.
Yeah, when I first promoted to sergeant, I was on midnights, and we had a gentleman that we found on the street, and we could all get his first name out of him. And we probably tied up 4 or 5 officers. We're searching through every database, trying to track down this guy's name, approximate age of date of birth. We're knocking on people's door at 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to find out, like, hey, is this John Smith belong to you? And no, we actually were waking up. We were calling police departments, other places. They were waking up their residents, trying to find out. Turned out this person lived like 3 doors down from where we were. But if we had this solution and we had gotten that into the hands of the family members before that, we would have this thing solved in a matter of moments and saved ourselves a lot of time and manpower issues and waking up residents and making people angry at us. But because, like I said, we're just trying to help somebody, but your resources are limited when you can't communicate well with somebody who doesn't have the ability to communicate with us.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate those stories. It's fun to hear, Officer Eddie, you just mentioned this, the lighting up of a daughter's face, realizing the situation for her parents may not feel as bad if it happens again. So those are awesome things to hear. Guys, I really appreciate you being with us today, taking time out. Appreciate your service. It's awesome to see how SafeEncounter has been used in Palatine. Hopefully others around you will recognize the benefit as well. And if anyone does want to learn anything more about SafeEncounter, you can head over to safeencounter.org. And then, for anyone listening, stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more information about Palatine, the successes they've had. So we appreciate your time.
Thanks again for joining us on this podcast. To learn more about ImageSoft, please visit ImageSoftInc.com. That's ImageSoftInc.com. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to Paperless Productivity, where we tackle some of the biggest paper-based pain points facing organizations today. We'll see you next time.